Pittsburgh Steeler fans, welcome to this week's episode of Steelers Touch Down Under. I'm Matt Peverell, and I'm joined by my co-host, as always, Marky D, Mark Davison from Central Coast, New South Wales, Australia. How you going, mate?
Good, Matty. How's it going? You're giving away my location, mate. I'm gonna have fans on the doorstep soon that come around my house.
That's it.
How's it going? We haven't been on a show for 2 or 3 weeks. It feels like I was away in Queensland. I came back, and then our show went a bit crazy, and I started to do the show solo. Then I got the flu last week. I was a little bit sick, and now we're here talking Steelers football, and we have Builders Life and Jason Miles from Atlanta, Georgia here. So I'm ready. I'm so ready for this show. Are you ready, Matty?
I'm ready, and we're going a little bit later than we have the last few weeks, so apologies to everyone there, but just a few little things on our side. But look, really interesting show today. I think everyone's sort of aware OTAs are wrapping up, and, we've got Dave Shipley in the house now as well, BTSC Nation. He's flexing the arm emoji. But, we know OTAs are wrapping up. We know mini camps to come, and then you've got, obviously, proper training camp. There's going to be a few weeks where news might be a little bit few and far between, but Mark was messaging me during the week, and he said, Matty, I've seen a little bit about the 2018 draft class, but, it's the rubber hits the road with them, this season. A lot of them might not be back next year. You got guys like Marcus Allen, who's an exclusive rights free agent. Mason Rudolph's the only one that's got a deal that goes past this year. You obviously got Terrell Edmunds that, his fifth-year option wasn't picked up. So, as we said, the rubber hits the road. But equally, when you look across the 7 players that were drafted, those guys have to play a really key role this year, So I thought it was a great idea, Mark. But, so just to recap, the Steelers picked up Terrell Edmunds in round 1, obviously, pick 28. Then they picked up James Washington in round 2 at pick number 60. Then they picked up Mason Rudolph, traded up there to get him at number 76. Chuks was picked at number 92. He was in the 3rd round as well. And you got Marcus Allen in round 5 at 100, pick 148. Jalen Samuels, pick 165. There in the 5th with Marcus Allen. And then you had Joshua Fraser, who, from my knowledge, didn't even make the roster. So he's not with us anymore. But the rest of the players are with us, which makes it really pertinent to talk about what sort of role they're going to have in 2021. Because as you said to me before we went on air, it's make or break for a lot of these guys. So I think when you think of this 2018 draft class, and obviously we'll go through each player, but, how do you sum up what they've done in the last 3 and a bit years for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
That's very interesting. What have they done? There's a lot of speculation about Edmunds. Is he the right guy at safety back there? Washington now is the 3rd receiver or the 4th receiver. Maybe he hasn't got too much. In the depth chart there, he's a bit low. Rudolph's still number 2nd, and people think now Haskins is going to go over Rudolph. On the grand scale of things, I don't think they've done very much. And that's not to say that they're not good players or that they're a key part for this team. But even now, Chuks is saying too, will Chuks be our left tackle, or is it the new rookie coming in there as well? And Samuels at the running back. A lot of people don't like Samuels for the running back, but now he's with Canada. So it's a very interesting. I don't know overall what they've done, because we haven't won anything with like the playoff or Super Bowl or things of that nature. These players, I don't believe any of these players have been in a Pro Bowl. Am I right with that? They haven't they?
No. And I got a question for you then, right? Minkah Fitzpatrick is often seen as the Steelers fan base as being our 1st round pick for 2019. But he was picked number 11 in 2018. So I wanted to clarify for everyone today, we're not going to cover Minkah because we want to cover the guys that have been on the Steelers for their full time since being drafted. But it's an interesting perspective, because we always say that he's our 2019 1st-round draft pick because we traded the 1st-round draft pick for him. But at the end of the day, he was actually drafted in 2018, and we've picked up his 5th-year option. So, he's an interesting one to think about in this mix. Because the Steelers were interested in him. And obviously, we picked a safety there in Terrell Edmunds at pick number 28, and he was kind of the best left on the board, if you like. But, yeah, it's a bit of an interesting perspective.
That's a very fair point, though, Matty. But here's another question back as well. Would you consider any of these players, the 2018 is still for life, like over Minka?
Yeah, James Washington could be that person. If I were them, and it's hard because a lot of wide receivers come out, right? But if they sat there and they said to James Washington, all right, let's assume that if he leaves the Steelers after his rookie contract, he gets a $6 million deal, right? He gets a $6 million deal by someone. He's roughly going to be in that ballpark. Maybe he gets $8 million. But if they said to him, James Washington said, look, we'll sign you on a 4-year deal, right? Team friendly in terms of cuttable, but we're going to pay you an average of 4.5 per year. Right? And we're going to pay you half of that right up front right now to sign up. It'd be up to him if he wanted to take it. Now, he'd be taking less money. But if they offered him that deal, I wouldn't be upset with that. I think he's always going to offer you something. But, it comes down to what he wants to do. And, NFL players have a very short shelf life. They've got to set themselves up for life. That'll come down to whether he thinks he can make more money, and it's hard to think that he's gonna turn down more money. But he's probably the one player on this team right now that I think you could sit there in 2021 and say, I'm happy for him to be here in 2025. I don't think many fans would say that in Rudolph.
See, that's a fair point because the only out of all these players from the 2018 draft class, now you've included Minka, but we won't do that through our list. I would only see that Minka for me is going to be a Steeler for life, and you have to keep him for his longevity of his career. However, when we go through all these other players from the 2018, it really is make or break. And will they be a Steeler for life? I don't know. So,
but the thing is as well, you look at Washington, and he averages well over 10 yards per reception, right? Well over 10 yards. In fact, it's more like almost 15, right? And then he's got 9 touchdowns off 90 receptions. So he gets a touchdown every 10 receptions. Now, and I know that he could have been used a bit more, but at the end of the day, Washington's performed. In 2019 when Ben was out, Washington was our standout wide receiver. And I think in the live chat right now, Steeler Nation 412 says some Steelers fans still think Washington has a chance to be a wide receiver number 2. It depends who they throw it to. It depends who's open. But I think he's a really serviceable number 3. Because the other thing we've got to look at, right? Even if Juju goes, Deontay Johnson's going to come off contract in the next couple of seasons. At the same time, pretty much we're going to have to pay Claypool a massive amount to stay with the Steelers. Do you really I don't think Deontay Johnson's on this roster after his rookie deal. No way. I think he's gone, similar to a Mike Wallace scenario. So do you lock up Washington now and invest in Washington and just get what you can out of Johnson? And they're very different players. I mean, these are the questions that are going to face the Pittsburgh Steelers and that face us as the fan base.
It's a very, very fair point. Matty, before we get into Washington, let's go back one step to Edmunds. What's the deal with Edmunds this year? We'll go through the list of the 2018 draft and we'll figure out what their personal future is and what they're going to do for the team this year. Because it really is make or break. And them being on the hot seat this year or trying to get a contract and try and survive in the league more than 4 years, will this help the Steelers? How do you feel about Edmunds into year? It's crazy. It's year 4 for these fellas. Year 4, they got to start doing something.
Yeah, I think with Edmunds, the hard thing about Edmunds is that, obviously in that rookie year, he had to play a stack load of snaps, right? And the Steelers secondary has been, was average, before Minka was coming in. You can talk about the cornerbacks, and obviously it's Steven Nelson before Minka came in. We don't have him anymore. He's not everything. We had Hayden and what have you. But I think my problem with Terrell is that there's so many missed interceptions from him. He's had 3 interceptions for a guy that's played a stack load of snaps. Pretty much played in every game, that's been there in, from a regular season perspective, since the Steelers have been there. I think he's only not started 1 game, and I think he's only missed 4 games in total where he's not been in there. So and then I think 2 of them were through injury. So the interceptions, he's had 3, he's only had 6 quarterback hits, only 4 tackles for a loss. He's never forced a fumble. He's only got 15 pass defense. So I think the problem with him is that he started out playing a bit more, even though it was strong safety. It was acting in a lot of a free safety deep role. And now he's moved into strong safety, which is great. And he definitely complements Fitzpatrick. And, not all of that shows up on stats. But I don't think – look, it's hard when you come off, in the last decade having a guy like Troy Polamalu, but so I don't think for Steelers fans and really for a lot of the NFL, you're sitting there going, he did really well when he was in that free safety position, nor should he because he was a rookie. But he's not really stood up and been like an awesome strong safety either. Like he's not really done those big hits. He's not forced those fumbles. He's not put that pressure, in the short and mid passing game that necessarily shows up on stats. So I agree with them not picking up his fifth year option, but that doesn't mean he's gone. He is another one that they could keep on a team friendly deal. Can they look at him for 3 years at like a $4 million mark or something like that? Oh, but I do think another team will throw money at him, and good luck to him. And also, like, there's been some good safeties that have come out of the draft the last few years that, you can get in the second and third round. And I think it kind of be worth the Steelers looking at a bit of a redo, because we know that, Terrell Edmunds, the narrative on him is that he's performed poorly for a first-round draft pick, but he's probably done really well for a third-round draft pick, and he's probably done pretty good for a second-round draft pick. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts, Mark?
I just feel there's a lot of pressure on Terrell Edmunds. Like, he hasn't, really done that big play. There was that one pass. I don't remember who the team was, but as soon as you said he missed the interception, he was there. He was covering the ball into the end zone on the left-hand side, ready to pick it off, but he jumped too early, or he was more into his head. I'm just not sure what direction the Steelers go next year with their safety. If they go and get younger, or if they have, let's say if we go into the playoffs this year and we lose again, then do you end up changing some of these positions at the role at safety? Keep Minka, but then have someone else back there. Maybe Edmunds goes to another team. So I'm just not really overly sure where he does fit into the future. If he's been playing 4 or 5 years, you're getting the same stock standard Edmunds play, then are you getting better, or are you just going to be average with him, and then it just settles there? So it's so intriguing for me, because I really don't look into the draft or their contracts that often. I only watch players on the field. I go, oh, that guy's wearing 50, I'm wearing Shazier today, or that guy's wearing 51 or 80, 82 or whoever. And I go, I like that player. But with Terrell Edmunds, you've got to start to think, what, like you said at the start, what has he done? What have they done? Like, you haven't seen that big pick six or the fumble, or I'm not sure where he really fits. I hope he goes well this year, because these players don't want to retire. They don't want to be left out in the wash. They want to keep playing.
The other thing is, I'm just going to list a number of names that are technically available according to over the cap for free agency, right? Like next year at the safety position. Tyrann Mathieu, Devin McCourty. Now those guys are plus 30. Obviously, Devin McCourty's like, going to be 35. Marcus May, who we know is pretty good from the Jets, but he's 29 next year. Marcus Williams from the Saints. Harrison Smith from the Vikings, who's 33. Jamal Adams, Keanu Neal, Justin Burris, the Marcus Joyner, and I mean, he's a bit older. Then you've got a Terrell Edmunds. You've got Jabril Peppers, who's done really well for the Giants. There's a lot of names there that I think Steelers fans would be much happier with than Terrell Edmunds, right? And right now, the Steelers are going to have the most money, in the NFL in terms of salary cap. And I said this on War Room a couple of weeks ago. It's going to be about $74 million currently, based on a projected cap around that $206 million ceiling. $206 million ceiling that the NFL's put out there. But you got to cut 30 off it straight away for TJ Watt. Let's just assume he's going to get paid $30 million a year on average. They got $45 million. Do you sign Terrell Edmunds for $4 million, or do you go after one of those top guys that I just mentioned and pay like $8 million and give Minka someone that's lethal out there? Because you've got a bunch of young cornerbacks and stuff this year. So, and then you can go after a really good cornerback in next year's draft, and there's some good cornerbacks there. So, like, this is the thing is, I would argue that Terrell Edmunds really needs to perform, because I know people talk about that team from the deal. I don't see him in Pittsburgh. Maybe he signs a 1-year deal, prove-it deal with Pittsburgh, but I don't see him here more than another 2 years.
He's got to make the Steelers question that their thoughts and go, do we want Edmunds here? So this year is for him is more. He's playing for a spot next year and for another team as well, and it's going to help our Steelers, because if he's playing like hard football and he's around the ball, and doing some, big plays, then hopefully the Steelers have to go, hang on a minute, do we need to draft someone next year, or do we need to bring another guy in? Or is Terrell our guy? Now, I don't think they'll ever say Terrell's our guy, They will there will be in competition. But something's got to change with him, I think. It's just my little review on it.
So, Vodka Drinker brings up a good question. What do you think Edmunds' trade value is?
Well, I was going to say, no, that's bad. I was going to say a bag of chips, but you can't say that. I don't know. I think it's so hard for me. He's a good player. I just don't know where he fits in this Steelers defense anymore.
I think he's worth a third round. Like I think you get a third round for Edmunds. But like there's not a team that stands out there for me that would really want him. Like, and I'm sure Jeffrey Benedict or one of those sorts of guys could name a team that he fits really well within. But I don't sit there and go, hey, this is who, I just don't see it. I wonder what he could do in a 4-3 as well. I think that's an interesting concept. But I mean, the live chats talked about Mollett or Malay, whatever, and then Brooks Jr. They're not as fast as Edmunds. And that's the thing is like Edmunds as an athlete is really good. And if you look at him, like Jeffrey Benedict chimed in the live chat and said the Steelers, because I know Jeffrey thinks he's, definitely that he's improving year on year. But that's what I was going to say. Do you look at it like, do you look at him like a Bud Dupree who got better year on year? And that's the thing. Like we might be really down and out on Terrell, and then this year he absolutely shows up. So, this is what Mark and I wanted to talk about in this week's show is like 2018 draft class. It's make or break, and Terrell Edmunds is exactly one of these make or break players.
I'll eat my words, like because I'm just I follow a lot of these players, and I don't know how to play football, so I can't really overly comment, right? But as a fan perspective, I just don't know what he's really doing at the moment. However, if he comes out and lights it up, and Minka and Edmunds are a duo at the back, and he can't get past them, and Minka's doing crazy plays, reading the field, interceptions, Edmunds is doing that hard hitting tackle, then I'll eat my words. And if he's going for pass breakups and doing all those things, and he's really playing for a spot, and the coaches believe in those two at the back are going to be our safeties for the next 2, 3, 4 years, or that, and they will work together so well. 100% I'll eat my words. It does feel a little bit like the Bud Dupree situation because many didn't like how he played for the first 2 or 3 years. So, and look, they're coming into the 4th year now, and if you want to get into Washington next, it's a big year. It's a huge year this year to get a contract for these players.
Well, the other thing I think about with Edmunds as well, which is the bit that we don't know because we're not in the Steelers locker room, right?
We're pretty far away.
Yeah, we're pretty far away, right? Is how does Minka like playing with him, right? Because just because he's not showing up on the stat sheet, but he might make life really easy for Minka, right? He might make really like Joe Hayden might really like playing with him too. Okay, like so that's the other perspective. Equally they lost Hilton, so could you see Terrell, come down and play the run a bit more in like that slot corner role against the run? Like that's a thought. Like given that the different undrafted guys that we've pulled out and the other cornerbacks we're looking to develop and guys like Pierre and the rest of it, it's just a thought, right? Or do you want to get him involved more in sub packages to bring him closer to the box? But then I sit there and I'm like, they didn't give him another deal. Right. So equally, were they going to give him a 5th-year option? And then they had to make the call between the two safeties of who they were going to give the 5th-year option because they want flexibility next year with the cap. And Minka's gone, hey, guys, I'm not up for it. You don't know what that's like. You don't know what that conversation is like. So, and I also see a world where, they let Edmunds go and they bring in even a more classic free safety than what you've got in Minka. And then you start moving Minka around a bit more too, because Minka's not a small free safety either. He can do a bit. He did a lot in college. He, was playing off, that edge and in and around the box a bit from Miami and didn't like it. But is that different in a Steelers defense where he can kind of pick and choose? And we know what he can do with forced fumbles and picks and, and what have you. So, this is the thing is like, I wonder whether there's a role here for Edmunds, just given who's coming off contract from a safety perspective and who's going to be available in the next few drafts, and given he didn't get the 5th-year option.
I just hope is to end on the Edmunds thing. I just hope Edmunds plays well enough, hard enough that it does have an impact on the Steelers. And that's why all these guys in the key positions in 2018, they really in a spot now to help the Steelers win. So that's the biggest thing. Do you want to move into James Washington next and what his role is? Let's talk about what do you think his role is this year within that receiving room?
I don't necessarily think we know because, we've talked about Juju playing outside now and what have you. But I think we just talked a little bit earlier briefly around his stats, right? 90 receptions. He had the 9 touchdowns, 1,300 yards so far in his 3 years. But I think when you talk about James Washington, his big opportunity lies in how well he and Big Ben work together in training camp, right? So if you go to training camp, and for whatever reason, like Claypool's always going to be in the mix because he's a big body. He can do a lot in the red zone and what have you, and he's fast. He's really fast for how big he is. So he's always going to be an option. But when you bring in a guy like Freiermuth, you've got a guy like Ebron coming back in a second year and Ben's getting used to him. You're having a proper offseason. This is going to come a little bit down to which player Big Ben gets the most chemistry when in training camp, and they're going to be in the front runners for the start of the season. And who's to say that he doesn't, have a better chemistry with Ben in training camp over a guy like Deontay Johnson? Who's to say that doesn't happen? And this is the thing, is it's going to come down to, because it also doesn't matter who's on the field. In terms of, if you set up in a, they're not going to do very much 4 wide receiver sets, but you've got 2 wide receivers on the field, tight end, running back, the classic stuff, right? He's got Najee Harris this year, Ben, as well. So he's got more guys to throw it to. It matters who gets open, what reads Ben's making, and who he feels comfortable with those throws. And we know that he called out James Washington early on in his career, and now he's feeling a bit more comfortable with Washington. So I see a world where he could take some snaps, or he could at least take some receptions or targets off other players. But we're not going to know the answer to this until training camp. And we're certainly not going to know. And even what it looks like in the first 4 to 6 weeks of the season, it might not look like that later on. So it's the biggest question out there. When I look at this draft class, particularly, apart from Chuks, which is a harder one to sort of assess, and we'll get to him. I think Washington's the biggest question mark, because we know whatever he puts on the field is going to be good. We just don't know the impact he's going to have because, we're not in 2021 season yet. I don't know. What do you want to see out of him, Mark?
I think this year for Washington, it's not really about his personal. It's obviously about his personal development. However, not about his personal stats, because this year Big Ben has so many characters to throw to, with the 5 receivers, 4 receivers, 2 tight ends, Najee in the backfield. And I believe Big Ben's only got 4,000 yards in him. So where does Washington fit in this game plan? And does it really matter? Is he more of a role player where he's not getting the yards? So then, on the stats when the Raiders or the Browns want to he only got, 500 yards, or we don't want him. I think his success this year is going to be based around the team. So if he's on the 3rd or 4th kind of player, get those key 3rd downs, some touchdowns, some yards, but Washington won't crack 1,000 just because, or be that big player, just because there's not enough yards in him.
Yeah.
You can't see Big Ben throwing 5,000 this year, can you?
No, not with a guy like Najee Harris. But this is the thing. It's I'll get creative on it. If you get a couple of seasons deep in Madden and he comes off contract, I just make James Washington a running back so I can sign him to a cheaper deal and I play lots of sweeps off him, right? But in a Matt Canada offense, who's to say that Washington won't do different things? I mean, one of the BTSC podcasts, and I can't remember, and it was a YouTube show, but I can't remember which one it was a few weeks or even a week ago, talked about, might have been the Scobro show, I'm not sure, but I can't remember, but they talked about him being able to take tight end catches, because in the middle of the field, because of how Grandpa strong he is. This is the thing. I'm open to how creative they can be with Washington, but at the same time recognize there's so many people in this receiving room potentially when you think about the tight end or both tight ends, and you think about Najee Harris, and a guy we'll talk about a little bit in part 2 of this week's show will be Jalen Samuels, what he might be able to do. And this is the thing with Washington. the thing that I like that we've got with Washington, yeah, so I think it was the Scobro show this week when Michael Beck went on with Rich. But the thing I like about Washington is that he's a player that we'd like to have, like in terms of depth, like we might not use him a whole lot, but if someone goes down with an injury, by gosh, are we going to be thankful we've got him? I just wonder though, can he show someone up at training camp? It's a contract year. That's going to be the interesting piece. And equally, and we'll get to Rudolph next, but James Washington and Rudolph have that relationship from college, which I don't necessarily think is translated as well into the NFL as what people thought it would, even when Ben went down. But if Ben's not coming back next year, do they keep, and they're going to go with Rudolph, do they keep Washington around to make Rudolph more comfortable, at the end of the day as well? Like, does that feed into it? And I know that's,
yeah, I get what you're saying, but then to be more comfortable, he's already been 4 years in the league. Do you know what I mean?
Like, I know, but like
how much more comfortable can you get?
I know, but that's what I was about to say before you jumped in. It's like, at the end of the day, you got to make your quarterback happy, because if the quarterback's not happy, the whole thing's not happening, right? So, like, do you concede that? And Mason Rudolph's, I think, is it a $5 million deal next year or something like that? So, like, is paying Washington when you were probably going to consider paying him a team-friendly deal anyway, giving him an extra mil or whatever to stay if it's below $5 million? Do you do that on a 2-year deal? I'm just saying it's an interesting perspective, but I could see another team throwing the right money at Washington.
Oh, 100%. I just think for him this year to be involved in this offense and how he's going to progress further as an NFL player, I think the team needs to be successful, and he pretty much has to catch every ball that is thrown to him. He can't drop anything. He's got to run some really good blocking. We know he does that. I'm just saying, if I was in Washington's shoes, I'd be like, holy, we got, Deontay, Juju, and Claypool, 3 great receivers. How do I make this team? What role can I play where I stand out a little bit more better than other players, and I can still help the team? And obviously it's winning, but if he catches 4 or 5 receptions a game for 50 yards, that's pretty good, and gets 1 touchdown and does some key blocking for Najee on the edge or something like that, and that's going to help out. But it won't look. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I think there's a lag. Yeah, I was going to say, like, he's only dropped like literally 11 passes off 176 targets.
He's very consistent. I did notice that he's very consistent, and he can be Ben's guy, but at the same time, DJ wants to be Ben's guy. Juju's Ben's guy. Ben has a lot of guys in this offense, and when this offense changes into more, hopefully, Najee running the ball, I just don't know where the receptions or the football is going to go to. Us as fans, it won't really matter. And I guess as a Steeler player, it wouldn't overly matter too. But if he's going into a contract year next year as a free agent, you've got to put something on paper that looks pretty good. And the Super Bowl does too, or playoff run does. But I don't think he'll have the stats to back him up. But, other coaches will look and say, what key role did he play? Where did he play? One thing for me, or how I like him, you don't really hear much about him. He just turns up and plays, and then he's, puts his helmet on and he works hard, and he's that grand pass strong. And that one touchdown, I don't know who it was first, might have been the Ravens or something like that. I hope it was the Ravens, but he just ran through them all, and the extra yards, like, I like that. But it's very interesting to see how the Steelers go next year. And if they do go with him again, like, he's a guy that, it can just kind of be that third guy or second guy and not talked about, and just shows up on the field every week. That's all I would love to see there, but it really depends how they're going to use him.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Awesome stuff. 1983 brings up, they'll bring him back if he doesn't find a good deal elsewhere. Yeah, I mean, this is it. Like, does he go out to try and find a market, and then he doesn't get it, and then you've got it like Juju did come back this year really cheap. I want to bring up Tyler W. though as well. We're used to an attacking strong safety a la Polamalu. Edmunds just ain't that guy. That's it. But this is the thing. How much does that allow Minka to, be a bit more freer? How much does that allow Joe Hayden to go after things as well? We've got to think of this in what happens schematically for the Steelers, what happens in terms of chemistry with other players. It's a classic NBA example. You can't have 5 superstars. It don't work. You've got to have guys that are happy to do, the hard yards, guys that are happy to do the scrappy stuff, guys that are happy to let your superstars do what they need to do and fit in. A team is made up of people that, are happy to make compromises, or that their play style, means that it's going to be a compromise from that perspective. But Mike, we've almost wrapped up part 1 of this week's show. Can you believe it?
Crazy.
As usual, we've got to bring in our Sling in the Slang segment. Just as Big Ben likes to sling the rock, we like to sling the slang. But I thought we'd kick it off, from my perspective, with just me. Just me, added into the live chat earlier in the show and said, "Hey, Aussies, question." I was watching a show based in Australia, and a guy said, "Thin edge of the wedge." I know what a wedge is. Is that a saying for you? Well, it's a saying for me. Like, my dad used to tell me when I was being naughty. Like, he's like, "Mate, you're on the thin edge of the wedge."
Is that about cricket? No.
I always understood it as like, like you're skating on thin ice, or like I always think of the wedge like on the knife's edge. I don't know. That's the way I've always interpreted it.
You hit the thin edge of the wedge.
It's like skating on thin ice, isn't it?
Oh, okay. That's awesome. That's just me's one. That's awesome. I've never heard that before. I just thought, you've
never heard thin edge of the wedge.
No, I thought it was when you nick the bails on you're doing a spinner and you bowl it and it just nicks it thin edge of the wedge. I've never heard that in my life.
Well, according to the Collins Dictionary, if you say something that is the thin edge of the wedge, you mean that it appears unimportant at the moment, but is the beginning of a bigger, more harmful development.
What?
I was like, what?
That leads into my sling in the slang, which is thin edge of the wedge, which I don't know about the harmful development, but mine this week.
Is this it? Is this like what the harmful development is? The 2018,
yeah.
The 2018 draft class is, the thin edge of the wedge.
Well, we should have started with that. That's awesome. I wonder where Just Me got that from. I've never. Oh, it was off the show.
Just Me. Tell us what show you're watching.
Yeah, it might have been like some country show, like Country's Practice or something like that.
Country, mate. I've never.
I don't know. Oh, that was it. I don't know. Mine this week, and I've used it before, but I just wanted to say it again because it's funny. When we're out in the middle of nowhere, or we're out the country, we say, whoop whoop. Like I just love how we, like our little things like, the middle of whoop whoop. Where you going? Oh, just out there, mate. Whoop whoop. Like it just. I don't know. I'm still stuck on that thin edge of the wedge. I like how it sounds.
Just me. Throw it into the live chat and tell us where that's from. Tell us what show you're watching. I'm interested to know.
That beats my whoop whoop this week. She's number one. Power Rangers.
I can remember when we said whoop whoop, Mark. I think that was back when it was podcast only for us.
Yeah, in the middle of whereabouts are you located? In the middle of whoop whoop, and that could just mean anywhere. It could mean Sydney.
Brian Brown says, "Let's not talk cricket. Hitting a croquet ball with a buttered chip."
Yeah, what's the thoughts on cricket? I believe it's a bit like baseball, but I believe a lot of Americans don't like cricket.
They don't. No, and it's impossible to explain it to them. But I reckon 2020 cricket would do very well over in the US. I reckon 2020.
Oh yeah.
And it'd be better than baseball. I think that if Americans saw 2020 cricket, I think that convert a lot of people.
I can watch that, and I sometimes watch the Test cricket because you can fall asleep in the afternoon after a few schooners, and you settle down on the lounge, and you had your big lunch, and you put the Test cricket on, and that goes from like 9 till 5. So you just have people in the background talking about cricket. But yeah, 2020 cricket is pretty good.
Yeah.
What's yours this week?
Oh, I had Just Me's. I thought that would do my
what a cop out.
No, I was thinking about it, and I saw on Good Morning Football on Thursday or Friday they had Kyle Brandt there, and he's apparently doing quarantine in Australia right now. I don't know what he's doing out here, but they were talking about Aussie chocolate bars. And I was just like, and they all seem to know all the chocolate bars, like, from like Cadbury, which Cadbury is owned by an American company now as well, but like Cherry Ripes and Picnics and, Freddo Frogs and, Caramello Koalas. And it just got me thinking about all the chocolate bars that we have that they don't have over in the States as well. So yeah, I was sort of thinking, Mark, at that one, what's your favorite chocolate bar? Australian
Oh,
chocolate
you-
bar,
you-
and
you
then
know
I'll
what it is?
describe it for everyone else.
Do you know what it is? Like, hands down, it's Kit Kat. Hands down. Love it.
Well, that's in America. That's no fun. What about Australia? No,
Oh,
you've got to be Cadbury only. Cadbury only.
I don't really know. This my favorite one would be Kit Kat. Cadbury only.
Oh, you can have the other ones too. Well, Nestle ones too.
But the thing is, see, that is my favorite, so I don't really have any other thoughts in my head. Like, do you know why I like?
So if you go out and get a chocolate bar every day of the year, you're picking a Kit Kat every time.
It happens a lot. When I go to the survey, we'll bring it back to Australia. When I go to the survey and I'm walking in there and I'm like, yeah, I feel like something, like a bit of a snack. I don't know, they're just easy to eat, and that ad gets you.
Do you remember the Kit Kat Chunky? I used to like the Kit Kat Chunky.
Unreal.
Really
Unreal.
good. And the dark
bad
chocolate. The dark chocolate Kit Kat's friggin' awesome.
They were bad for you because there's so much chocolate, and you could eat 2 of them and you'd feel really sick. But then, some reason on this thing they're like not full on chocolate, and you just like crack one, and you got this 4 in there, and you have the mint chocolate as well. That's always my go-to.
Righto. Well, and Dave Shipley brings up a super chat. We'll talk about that one in part 2. But with that wraps up part 1 of this week's Steelers Touch Down Under. I'm Matt Peverell. You're with Mark Davison as well. Join us for part 2. We're going to continue on this 2018 draft class. If you're on the audio side, flick over to part 2. For everyone on the YouTube side, just hold tight for a couple of seconds, and we'll be back with you for part 2. And we're back on Steelers Touch Down Under. I'm Matt Peverell. As I said before in part 1, you're with Marky Davison. Mark, awesome idea this week on 2018 draft class. Who we got next to talk about?
I reckon we have a pretty good topic here with Mason Rudolph. And a lot of the fellas from behind the steel curtain have been talking about Rudolph this week. Actually, a lot of the Steelers guys around media have been talking about Rudolph. So we'll kick it off with you, Matty. What do you think? What does Rudolph bring to the team this year? That's a big question.
Mark, Rudolph brings stability.
Is that right?
I think with Rudolph though, like you look at backups, right? And unless you're going to spend loads of money on a backup, or you've got a rookie, or a guy that's on their rookie contract, and you bring in an experienced backup, I think Mason gives someone that the coaching staff are familiar with. I think the big part that I like, Jeff covered this really well on his Let's Ride this week, which airs Monday, Wednesday, Friday. On his Friday one, he did this sort of heart-to-heart segment as well. But he talked a lot around Mason Rudolph and the fact that he had no quarterback coach for a couple of his first 2 years. He was thrown into the NFL in 2019. He got smacked in his second start, against the Ravens off a hit, which I do believe was dodgy. I don't think that was fair.
100% that was dodgy. That was a helmet.
I thought that was absolutely ridiculous.
And that wasn't called, was it?
No, it wasn't called. No.
Unreal.
And so that's an issue for me. Obviously, the Myles Garrett situation. A lot of fans are just closed off to him, right? Absolutely closed off. I wrote a piece on the air raid offense last year before we played Week 17 game against the Browns, and I spoke a lot with KT Smith about it. I ended up doing a lot of research about it. And you look at what he was able to do in more of an air raid system, and it's pretty incredible actually from Mason Rudolph. And he does have a deep ball. And I think what we saw in Week 17 was a lot better last year. And I don't care. People can sit there and say he's not the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Fine, be that as it may, he still played pretty bloody well. And what I was frustrated was that interception he threw, because you could see he was just trying to overly push the ball. I think he was trying to do a little bit too much. But in terms of a backup, a serviceable backup, the price that he is, and another chance to develop, I think it's really important. And, we talk about how terrible Randy Fichtner was. One of the biggest damning things about Fichtner is that they didn't hire another quarterbacks coach. And I think that's very clearly an insecurity on Fichtner's side. I think it's oh, no, they couldn't hire another quarterbacks coach because that person might put me out of a job. I might get unstuck because, I'm the offensive coordinator, but I'm really just a glorified quarterbacks coach. So, God forbid if I actually had to, do proper offensive coordinator work. Now, you can tell I'm pretty apathetic toward Fichtner, and I am, because I think it was the worst thing they could possibly do. And I think for the Pittsburgh Steelers, it is a bit of a blight. I think that's one of the – I won't criticize the franchise too often, and I won't criticize Mike Tomlin too often. But organizationally, I do think this is a mistake in them not giving Mason Rudolph, a quarterback coach to help develop him. Jeff talked about how Mason had cited that Canada was a real confidant for Mason Rudolph. And, he's got another quarterbacks coach again this year. So, that's really important for his development. But if we look at him overall, Mason think of him like a 2019 draft pick because he didn't play in 2018. He had no coach. He had no coach in 2019. He's forced to learn virtually by osmosis, standing on the sideline. And then he gets one in 2020 and suddenly becomes a lot better. And the other thing as well is, as fans, if we take this a little bit wider for the Steelers in the future, or you take it from wider in the NFL's perspective, we expect everyone to do everything on day one, right? Even if they're and particularly if they're 23 or 24 as a quarterback, you just expect them to be able to do it all. But at the end of the day, quarterbacks are playing till they're 40. Does it matter if it takes him till 25 or 26 if he's not starting to get it together? Does it really matter? If he has to sit there for those 2 or 3 years and then he's good to go, really good, he's not necessarily going to be a Hall of Fame player, but he's enough that we can invest everywhere else in the defense and running backs, and we give him lots of options. We've got a tight end in Pat Freiermuth that can learn this year and be a go-to next year and what have you. Is that the worst thing in the world? The Steelers have done well when they've not had a Hall of Fame quarterback. We've still done pretty well. We haven't necessarily won a Super Bowl, but we've done pretty well.
We've always done pretty well. Before I get into my thoughts, Matty, I want to bring up Dave Shipley's super chat. And we have an interception here from Devin Bush. And I want to ask you this question before we get back into Rudolph.
Yeah.
Dave, thanks, mate, for the $5. Who wins the inside linebacker spot next to Devin Bush? And great show, guys. Glad you're healthy. Thanks, mate. Me just quickly, but Matty will go into it. I think Spillane wins it and Vince will back up in certain different spots. What are your thoughts?
I think it depends on whether we're going run or pass. I think as well with that from that perspective, but I think you'll see it more from Vince. I think they'll let Devin do what he does best. But at the same time, I'd like to see Devin put a bit more pressure on the quarterback at times this year. Now, I know that's not the role they often ask him to play. So that's going to be an interesting perspective. But I also want to see a bit of Buddy Johnson next to him. I want to see them start to develop some chemistry there, particularly mid-season when you need to manage snaps. And that goes back to Rudolph as well. I would love for the Steelers to be in a position, and I know we've got Najee and we're going to be able to run out games, but I'd love the Steelers to be in a position where, and we talked about this a few weeks back, I think, in managing Ben's snaps, in that, I think, we talked about it with maybe it was Najee that we talked about it, or what, or it was one where there was a player we talked about how, you want to ease it off because the Steelers are in a good position so that they're playing a lot of snaps, throughout the season. It was with Quincy Roche and Highsmith we were talking about it, where let's get Roche to spell other guys so that he gets a Highsmith level of snaps, but it's across the season, not, a fixed number of games because there's an injury. I think the same thing goes to Mason Rudolph. I would hope that the Steelers are up in enough fourth quarters, or they're up in a half a quarter or whatever, that we can give Mason a bit more there. Or do you even spell, if we're up by a touchdown, a couple of touchdowns, going into halftime, can you spell Ben, going into halftime just to give him a bit more time, particularly if you're not going to be receiving the ball in the second half. So this is the thing, is that I would like to see them integrate Mason in more so that Ben is fresh in the playoffs.
I wish the NFL did that more with teams and the Steelers. We don't seem to do that. We seem to play Big Ben to the last 4 minutes and then take him off. But why not bring him up if you do have a bit of confidence in Mason? And maybe it's a little bit different than coming in halfway through the game and let's say it's 17-10, and you do need more points before you can get him on. But it would be interesting to see how you could do that with the quarterback, because I know when they bring Ben off, and he never wants to come off, but the season is longer. And I've got a question for you, Matt, and I've got my answer. But how many games do you think Mason starts this year?
2.
I've got 3. I'm similar to you. I think he has to play minimum 3 games, just because it's a long season and it's going to help our playoff run too.
But is your 3 including a niggling injury to Big Ben, or is yours 3 just 3 just to rest up Big Ben?
I just think overall it's just going to happen that way. So it might be an injury. It might be off the bye. Hopefully we have things wrapped up by the end of the season. Then you can play one game there. But we've also a massive debate as well last year and years previous where we don't play our starters and we come back in the playoffs and we lose. So there's all these kind of things that I'm like, do you play better than
But the
last
thing
season?
is, yeah, and this is the thing though, is that like you got, I think it's, what was it, Ravens week 17 to close out the season. You probably don't want Mason. Like, I'd be very surprised in a position
the
where
Ravens play really, really dirty near the end, don't they? We've seen it before in previous years where they take out plays and they want to hit you hard. So, yeah, maybe you don't want Big Ben playing that game, but I can see.
Well, but
Mason,
I don't know if I want him missing it though. Like, what if we need that to get into the playoffs? And equally, like Big Ben seems to have this week off before we're going to be in the playoffs, like when we lost to Jacksonville and when we lost last year. And then he goes and throws for like 500 yards, whatever, because he's feeling fresh. I want him handing the ball off more.
But do the Steelers learn from that? Because it's happened twice now into the playoffs. And what I've been preaching and what you've been talking about too is we have to win that game, in that playoff game, that first one, because we haven't done it in 5 years. And if you rest Big Ben, we're going to rest him. Then he comes out into the playoffs and then we lose. They don't seem like they're clicking. So, but at the same time, it's the 50-50 debate. Then if you play him, he gets injured or whatever, then he won't be there. I don't know. I think this year though, I think Mason is in a good role, backup, but I believe he will start at least 3 games somehow. Maybe one after the bye. Like give Ben 2 weeks off on the bye. What's it really going to matter? Have a bye and then let Mason play the week after.
Yeah, don't they have the bye and then I forget who they play and then don't they go Bengals Lions? You know, that could be a perfect 2 weeks where you put Rudolph in there.
Did you not rest Big Ben for a little bit? He's a veteran. He's been doing this for
I agree with
years.
you. I think
you've got to put him in there somewhere.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think
having
a mid-season break anywhere between week 7 and 11, where there's 2 or 3 weeks, including the bye, I think is fantastic because then you give Ben like a lot of the start of the season to get with it and get that rhythm with the offense. And then you bring him back to get that rhythm again before, there's a lot of games, tough games to close out the schedule. And then you send him firing into the playoffs. Like, it's awesome. And this is the thing as well. Like, in years past, when the schedule was shorter, when we did win, a lot of our Super Bowls and what have you, whether it was the 16 games or even shorter than that, like, they're not playing the amount that, Ben's having to play at the age that he's playing at. So, it's going to be an interesting one. But who have we got next on the list in terms of the draft?
Yeah, this show's going super fast. We've got Chuks. You got Chuks. What are your thoughts on Chuks this year and for his own personal game and for the Steelers? How does he fit? Is he playing lights out to secure a spot?
Yeah, I think he needs to play lights out. I think when he's come in, he's actually done pretty well. But I'd really like to see Dan Moore Jr. put pressure on him. I'd like to see, what that looks like. And, I'm hoping that that's enough to spur, Dan Moore Jr. to try and get a starting role as well. I know that's very unlikely, but I would really like to see him start, at least a bit in this season. Chuks has got to have a big year for the Steelers to do well because what if Banner has another injury? What if there's another injury on the line and someone's got to move around? So this is the thing, I think, and maybe that's it. Maybe Dan Moore Jr. is playing a guard position like he did, in college as well. So Chuks actually has to play well this season. It's not an if. He's got to play well, as he starts. And also he's playing for a future role in the NFL too. Look at a guy like Kevin Beacham that we had or Kelvin Beacham that we had that, went on, he was serviceable, but he was still never going to pay him, what he got offered to go elsewhere. That's where Chuks should be aiming this year. That's really where Chuks should be aiming. And, it's his chance to make some real money because I don't really think he's going to be back. So,
yeah, and Belchin came back a few times, didn't he? He went to the Cardinals, I believe.
I think it was the Cardinals, yeah.
The Cardinals, and then came back after. It's another key spot where we need a guy. He'll play left tackle, right? And then Zach Banner will play right, and then Moore will compete for it.
I assume that's what they're going to do, yeah.
But then the same thing too. Can Chuks play 16 games? Can he do it? Is that Is that possible? Like the more that this season and next year when it goes to 18 games and they're going to play 17 and one bye, you're going to need real depth in these teams because these players are playing really hard football and it's a long season from now. We have preseason to regular season and playoff. Can he hold up the whole time on that left-hand side, keeping Ben upright and getting in that running game? And health comes into it as well. So I think it's a very important year for Chuks to stand out as a Steeler and for his own personal game. And look, these guys, this is the spot now where they need to get paid next year. They get paid some money and continue in the NFL. Otherwise, no team picks them up and they're on the out, aren't they?
Well, that's it. That's it. It's make or break. They're on the thin edge of the wedge.
Love that. I love what you did there.
Let's move on. Who was next? Marcus Allen, was it?
Marcus Allen, which is a very intriguing one too. Where does he fit in the middle linebacker? Is he safety? What are they doing with him? I've heard reports he's put on weight now. He's a bigger fella. I did like his tackling skills. I mentioned that in the previous shows before. But I haven't seen him do any big plays. Is he more of a special teams guy? Where does he fit in this role, and what's his future?
Well, Mark, before I crack into it, where do you think Marcus Allen will be for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year? I think
he has to do something really crazy or really important to this team. He's got to, maybe he's that nickel guy, dime guy that comes in on certain packages and he won't let up third downs, and he's gonna be that kind of roamer guy. But he's not the guy that the Steelers talk about that is involved in this defense. You don't really hear his name too much. So this is the year though. Like if he were to come out and get pick sixes and fumbles and really be around the football and become a leader in that group, this is the one you're like, holy, Marcus Allen, who's this guy? Like this is the year for it. This is the year for the defensive guy, knowing that you have all the pieces in the defense with TJ and all the big boys up front, and you have Edmunds on the back. Minka, you have Bush back, you have all these guys. This is the role we spoke about before with some players, that you can be a good player, but this defense will make you a great player if you play it right. If you play the Steelers defense, TJ is going to help you out. Bush is going to help you out. So if you can be in your certain spot, whatever your coach should do, and not mess up and play some really good football, then they might think, oh, Marcus Allen's. He's a guy now. He's one of our guys. What do you reckon?
I'm not a fan of Marcus Allen. I think he got drafted on a lot of promise. I don't think he ever really showed up in it. Even for the position they're going to play him, he's going to only be 215 pounds at the moment. I don't know what he's upscaled to now and what he's weighing in at. I'm just not a fan. I would prefer his snaps get divided up between different players or they go after someone else. I'm just not a fan.
So do you think he's hidden then? He's hidden in the defense. So what I'm saying is he's hidden, but if he plays well, he will stand out. Whereas you're more like saying he's just hidden because he's not really a good player. Is that correct? But
this is the thing for me though, is like I think the role that he plays can be taken and shared by so many other people that I think it's better to give them NFL experience than to sit there with him. Like, is it really going to work this late on? Like, I feel like this is a pride thing now. I feel like holding on to him, when War Room was Cap Room or even when we're focusing a bit on Cap, which we do in part of War Room, I looked at him. He's never someone that I've been a fan of them bringing back. I think it's wasted Cap. Like, I honestly just think it's wasted Cap Room. I'd go after someone else.
Do you think Marcus, does he get beaten coverage? Is he got pull? Like, I think he's a good tackler, but that's just what I see on the end of,
I think he's a good tackler, but I don't think he can play up. I don't think he's necessarily got the size or the weight or the experience or the skills to play up to how good the tackling is with the options you can have with him. And I just don't think he's fast enough outside of that. Like, yeah, I've just really never been a fan of him.
So
he's not a fan.
For you, the ceiling is he's hit the ceiling. Time to move on. He might play with us this year and do whatever he does, and we win a Super Bowl, but nothing will come out of it. His ceiling is capped off.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they bring him back. Like, maybe he can do something on special teams more than he has. I don't know. I'm just not a fan of him. I just cut him.
We should do the surprise player of the year and call it the Marcus Allen Award. And
no, the most cuttable player, the Marcus Allen Award.
Well, we'll get into that. We'll get into that in the.
I'm not a fan of him. I just do not like him.
All right. Well, somebody I'm a fan of. We'll go on to the last guy. This show has gone crazily fast. Jalen Samuels. What are your thoughts on Jalen Samuels? Another guy in the similar situation to Washington, third or fourth depth in the running game. What are your thoughts on him this year? And will he have a job next year with the Steelers, or will he even be in the league next year?
I think he'll be in the league. He'll make someone's squad, and then that might be it if he's not with the Steelers. I mean, look, he's not a traditional running back. He's an older style NFL H-back. I think that's unfortunate for Jalen Samuels. I think awesome stuff in the live chat said bye-bye Samuels. Everyone's interested in what he can do in a Matt Canada offense. I am as well. I feel like everyone's talked about that like so often this offseason. The thing for me, though, is that when you have Ebron, Freiermuth, and then God knows who else, and really actually God knows who else, because I mean, quite frankly, everyone else, could be cut or not there or whatever, like bye-bye Gentry, bye-bye Raider, Raymond, whoever else is sort of there in that room. I would like, if you can bundle him on the roster as the third tight end, I'm happy with that, right? Completely happy with that. But in terms of the running back position, like, I don't know. I just don't see him there as this third or fourth running back. Jeffrey Bendy brings it up and says he thought, Jalen's checked out in OTAs. I don't know. He's another guy. As well, this is the other thing, is that when teams cut down their rosters, there's going to be a bunch of guys that didn't necessarily make free agency that we're going that are going to be available at different positions. That's going to include the running back position. That's going to include the tight end position, particularly because there's a lot of expensive tight ends around the league right now. So I think the problem with Jalen Samuels is he doesn't fit in that running back room. His average is like 3.5 yards off the carries he's had. He's now not even cracked 500 yards for the Steelers. He's another guy. This is the thing when we talk about, make or break for the 2018 draft class, or who are the guys that are on the thin edge of the wedge, which seems to be the theme of this show. Most of these guys are coming to the end of their time with the Pittsburgh Steelers, or there's only, really one or two guys that are going to stay here. And this is what you see out of a draft class. You get as much as you can out of them. You give them some time to develop. It doesn't happen. It's bye-bye, see you later. And yeah, the more I think about it, it's bye-bye, see you later for him, just because I don't think he necessarily fits. He's not going to give you what you need at the running back spot, and he's not going to quite give you what you need at the tight end spot. So that might, give him a stay of execution, if you like, for 12 months, but it's not going to mean that he's on this roster long term.
Yeah, I like the guy. I've always watching him play, and I believe he's a good receiver in certain aspects. But you're right, he hasn't had the amount of carries that we. He's never really had the opportunity. He's had a bit of opportunity for the carries, but heading into your fourth season, I believe he's only had 100 carries or something, like 500 yards. But with receiving, he's had, I think, 800 with 4 touchdowns. So that's kind of his game. Now, where does he fit in that running back room? Here we go. Where does he fit in that running back room? Najee, McFarland, Snell, Ballage. And like you said, the best, craziest part is when all these camps get together and the cuts happen, and there's free agents all over the shop, and the Jets might not like one guy, that we pick him up and we like him. So I don't know where he's going to fit. I kind of hope he does make the team, but he's really got a tough task to make the team this year. And look, if he does make the team for next year's talent as well, it's similar to James Washington. How does he get stats, and how does he, affect this game? It's very, very hard for this year with the new running back. It's very hard. And all our receiving core, he almost, if you were to say the ball carrier or ball catcher, he must be like number 9 or 10 that's going to get the ball. Do you know what I mean? He's down the list. He won't be up there in stats.
Yeah, 100%. He for me is in the what the hell 5. I have a what the hell 5 on the Steelers roster, right?
We haven't got time for that, and I want to know what that is.
I'll tell you quickly, right? Jalen Samuels, Derek Watt, because I don't know what he does at the fullback position, Cassius Marsh, right? Henry Mondo. And I know he does returns, but I think you can find it anywhere. But it's Ray McLeod for me. It's just my what the hell 5. Yeah.
I love that. That's a cool little piece. I like Mondo.
Oh, Marcus Allen. Sorry, I forgot Marcus Allen. It's like a what the hell 6. Yeah.
Isn't it? You can't do what the hell 6. It's what the hell 5.
Right, well, I'll take Ray off. It's a what the hell 5.
Look, some reason I like Mondo 8. Maybe because it's his name. His name just sounds like super funny.
I don't know.
But I know what he's saying. Like he's saying.
And I was the same with Dangerfield. Dangerfield used to be on my what the hell 5.
Oh, but he might be cut this year as well. I kind of liked, but he was more of a special teams guy. It wasn't really
still part of the what the hell 5.
Even playing special teams.
Yeah, what the hell 5. Find that from someone else.
It'd be so great if we were to get, had 5 of those players looking to do interviews with us, Matty, and then now they won't come on. Thanks a lot.
That's all right. I haven't done the Pittsburgh Steelers much longer, so what's the point?
You just pissed them all off.
All right. Well, they pissed all us off with not going to the playoffs. It's not my problem.
Yeah, that's true. No, I don't know about the Cassius Marsh one. I don't know how he comes into this role. Like he's just a Steeler now, and is he just going to be special teams? Was Ray or Ray said it was 6, and he's going to be our 6th receiver. I like how you put a bit of thought in that too, though, into what the hell 5. Love it.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm a big fan of Rico Bussey. I would love to see him take Ray's spot, to be honest. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, to change it up. There you go. Jeff says Dangerfield, special teams captain, man, Matty taking names. Look, I like Dangerfield. I talked to him on the Instagram. He actually likes my Steelers Nation Australia, so but I don't think he's not very active in there, but he's part of it.
Maybe I need some new black and gold goggles. Maybe my black and gold goggles are a bit scratched.
You just come in with a bit of heat today at the very end of the show to really, we have to look. They're coming to the end of the show, but we're addressing that next week. Those
sure.
5, we're addressing that at the start.
Yeah, well, I'm often very much that homer role for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they've got the haters sometimes in it
because
too.
You even put Watt in there too. One of our favorites, Derek Watt.
He's not one of my favorites. He doesn't do anything. If they just said he was a special teamer, I'm happy with that, right? And I think he does a lot in special teams, and he's worth it. But he's not a fullback. All
right. Okay. Well, that's done me in today. That last bit there in the last 5 minutes. That's my idea. The show has been done in 2018 season. I had no idea that was going to go that direction in the last 5 minutes. But Matty, you wanna send us out or do the wrap up?
Yeah, that's it. If there's no more questions from the live chat, I can tell you who's the best number 5. But no, look, that wraps up Steelers touchdown under for another week. Thank you everyone for joining us, particularly on the YouTube and Facebook side this week. If you're listening to us live on audio as well, whether that's on Spotify, Stitcher, Pandora, Luminary, Apple iTunes. I'm sure we're on something else too. I think SoundCloud if you listen to us through the website. Thanks for joining. Just me, she said, glad I made this show. She did. That's the thin edge of the wedge. Hopefully it's not the thin edge of the wedge for our shows going forward. Jeffrey says, hit the like button on the way out, folks. Thank you very much, Jeff. And yeah, Steelers fans, stay safe. Have a good weekend. And as always, Mark,
go Steelers.